Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. It is February and I have a wrap up for you that's going to be all of the books that I read in December, almost nothing, all of the books I read in January, very little, because I was excited to start the year off and then life said, reading slump, you dumb bitch. So that's what I got instead. So I'm gonna break this video into chapters because I have a lot to talk about. So in January, I said I'm gonna set a TBR because my reading is so inconsistent month to month. So let's see what it's like for me as a mood reader to set a TBR. And there's a lot to talk about, so there will be chapters in this video. And we're gonna start with December. Let me tell you about the books that I DNF'd in December, because that'll be very easy and straightforward. In December, I was traveling quite a bit, so I didn't read a lot. So the only books that I was reading that I DNF'd was this one, which is like the ice skating book. I'll have it on the screen so you could see it. I didn't get far enough into that for me to actually count it as a DNF. I read like 5 pages, decided that I didn't like the writing and passed. And then I read Love Light Farms. I got to like 20% and I simply was like, I don't care. I don't care. So I DNF'd that as well. And because I was feeling like a Scrooge, and here I was traveling through these beautiful countries, seeing all of their holiday decor, and I was still like, fuck this season, I decided that I too wanted to catch that holiday glee. So I decided to read smut. So let's start with our Scrooge porn. Yes, you heard that right. I read Enticing the Scrooge by Jessica Kane. Jessica Kane and I have a very complicated relationship, and that I feel many of the things that she writes makes me uncomfortable, but I do think she could write smut really well. So Enticing the Scrooge follows this girl who is running an orphanage, even though she's like 18 years old, and people are petty as hell. They're like, she's a thief, she's a terrible person. Meanwhile, my girl hasn't done anything. And then we have our Scrooge character who needs to get married in order to get his inheritance. He's hosting this massive ball to try to find the right bride, but he's like, all of you ain't it. He briefly catches a glimpse of our heroine about to come to his front door through his window, and he's like, mine. Falls in love immediately. Okay. She almost freezes to death somehow between the span of his window and his front door, and he brings her in and then takes her virginity with his fingers upstairs, and it just devolves into chaos from there. I gave this book 2 stars. I was enjoying the chaos up until the point where they actually started to have sex, and my girl calls him daddy. Jessica Kane does a daddy kink, but also thinks of him as her father who adopted her, and it gets very, very, very not for me from there. So I'm gonna leave that at that, because you can see my full reaction and my full thoughts to exactly the scene that I'm talking about in my Amsterdam vlog. That's the only thing I read while I was traveling. So then I read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, because I was like, you know what, let me try to get through some of my physical TBR. This book follows a woman whose husband has just, well, a woman who's dealing with grief after her husband passes away. She is an actress. She has a heavy drinking problem, and her mom is like, you're gonna stop embarrassing me and you're gonna take your ass to this cabin where your husband died, because that's a good idea. So she goes up to the cabin, she's forced to, and there is a family across the lake, and she is constantly watching them through her binoculars. She sees that the husband and the wife have a fight, and then the wife goes missing, and she's trying to figure out what the hell happened. This book was really slow to start with, because I was like, what? And then I actually really enjoyed it, because the ending is definitely chaotic. It is not for everyone, but I live for the chaos of the ending, so I had a really great time with it. I read this a while ago, but know that I gave it 4 stars. I liked it. There are definitely some things that I didn't like and some references that I didn't like. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but overall, I enjoyed the story. Then I read The Fastest Way to Fall by Denise Williams. This is a book that I had owned for a long time. It follows a plus-size woman who is a writer. She's trying to land the perfect gig at her company so that she can get a promotion and finally be like the journalist that she wants to be. So she decides that she's going to write an article about this new fitness app. She works for a wellness magazine. So this fitness app does not center weight loss at all. It is really just about finding like health in the way that works for you, with no emphasis and no focus on the numbers on a scale or your weight or your body. It's all about how you feel. She decides to try that. She ends up getting matched up to a personal trainer or like a personal coach who is actually the CEO. She doesn't know that. He doesn't know that she's a journalist. And throughout their interactions with each other, they fall in love and they deal with the fallout of her being a journalist, writing about her boyfriend's company, and her not knowing that and him not knowing that she's a journalist. I really enjoyed that. I am not pitching it well. Just know that it was a very cute story. Our hero is absolutely obsessed with her, and I always love to see that. I gave that book 5 stars, although upon further reflection, it is still a 4.5-star book, but continues to be one of my favorite books that I read of 2022. In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This is a book. Ooh, I forgot a book that I DNF'd. We're gonna come right back to that book, I promise you, because the reason we're talking about December reads is for this book alone. Okay, so In a Jam by Kate Canterbury is a story about a woman who had a very complicated childhood. Her parents were always kind of moving around. They kind of left her. She's forced to go live with her grandmother in Rhode Island. We're years in the future where she has just been left at the altar of her wedding. She decides that she's going to escape. Her grandmother, who has passed, has left her farm in that town she spent her teenage years at. So she goes back and she runs into Mr. Grumpy Neighbor, who's raising his niece because his sister is unable to.
When he runs a farm and they were childhood friends and he was in love with her, but she didn't know it.
Every trope you could possibly fucking think of is in this book. Grumpy Sunshine, single dad, falling in love with your neighbor, small town, everything. There's only one bed, like literally. All of it is in here, and I had a good time with it. I think that I really enjoyed the dynamics between the characters. The characters felt very well developed. I loved their interactions. I loved the whole single parent angle. I liked that they all had their own things going on. I even liked how the tropes all worked together without feeling overwhelming. I think the downfall of this book was its length. It isn't particularly long, although it is long. It's just that there's a point about 2/3 of the way into the book where almost nothing is happening, and that just means that we're reading the same thoughts, and I'm just like, just skip to the ending. But I still had a great time with it, and I gave this book 4 stars. And the final book that I finished in December was Santa Claus is Going to Town on Me. You heard that right. I decided that I was tired of being a Scrooge, and I really did want to catch that holiday glee. And what screams holiday glee more than peppermint? You know exactly what I'm talking about. So Mr. Santa Claus is delivering presents, and it turns out he stops at this house and has the wrong address because he's going for a Holly. But he thinks that Holly's a 5-year-old girl. Actually, Holly is a grown-ass woman who's like, who the fuck is breaking into my house? So she comes down with swords and sees Santa Claus. And instead of thinking, who the hell is this man breaking into my house dressed as Santa Claus, she thinks, oh my gosh, it's Santa Claus. And actually, I kind of want to things I want to do. Now, Santa Claus knows exactly what you want. So of course he's able to read her desires. And he's like, you know what? I've got to deliver these gifts, but I'll be back in the morning if you want to. And Holly agrees because why not? Why not fuck Santa Claus? So they get to bang in. Santa Claus makes some very fun toys for her. Wow. You just get those moments where you're like, what the fuck am I actually talking about? He uses those toys in the bedroom, and they have lots and lots and lots of sexy times, and let's just say it, they spend a lot of time together. And Holly has a lot of childhood trauma. Santa never brought her any gifts, and she has a problem with that. So they break through it and they fall in love. It's a super short novella. It is actually ridiculous, but it was very fun to read, and I like that there was actually some emotional depth without losing its humorous undertones, I guess. And I gave this book 4.5 stars. Not because it was a masterpiece, but because it did in fact give me that holiday glee. Now, besties, I think I was subconsciously blocking this book from my mind because I DNF'd this book. No Getting Over You, also by M.L. Eliza. Let me just read you part of the summary that I never read before I got to this book. I'm lost in him, consumed by him, knowing that he could snap me in half in a second. Grind my bones to make his bread thrills me more than it should. Besties, if I had read that line before I started this book, I would not have started this book. But let me tell you, I was like, you know what? I read so much monster smut. Somehow, in my mind, I was like, Me not reading ogre porn is a problem. So let me tell you, this quickly goes off the rails. So we're following Jacqueline, who is trying to find herself. So she goes on a hike in the woods, falls through a hole, lands, gets seriously injured, but lucky for her, she's run into Shrek. Yes, Shrek. His name's not Shrek, but trust me, he's fucking Shrek. So she runs into him and he helps heal her. And again, my girl's not like, holy shit, my mind's been blown. There's ogres that are fucking real. She's like, I want to hop on that. So here's where I got lost. He is described as being so wide, he's as big as a king-size mattress. I don't know if you ever sat on a king-size mattress, but that width to you is very, very big. And I'm just like, if that's how wide as he is, his must be so big that it literally cannot fit inside of you. My bitch, you are going to die trying to hop on his. And he's very sweet, you know, he's very kind, but there's a point where he's trying to keep her warm in the bed just by like hugging her, and she wakes up, and of course, again, why not fucking ogre, kisses him and describes his hot breath blowing in her face. Living in the sunlight, loving in the moonlight, having a wonderful time. And her mouth, like this is his mouth and this is her trying to kiss him. I don't know if this still counts as vor if he doesn't eat her, but I was just like, no, I don't want to fuck Shrek. I'm not into this. You're literally describing Shrek, and I am going to politely leave now. So that wraps up December. Let's move on to January, starting with my set TBR. Besties, you will know that I did not stick to this TBR. I really didn't. I am a mood reader, and the slump hit me hard because I read a book that put me into a slump. Let's start with the books that I DNF'd. I was like, you know what's gonna help me get into a reading mood? Reading alien porn. So I read Riv's Sanctuary, which is a story about a woman who has been trafficked by aliens, and she is forced to live in a zoo of sorts with very poor conditions. One day the zoo master is like, I'm fucking selling you. So she has to go to an auction where in this alien world, humans are really seen as like stupid, very almost animal-like creatures and only used for sex. And she's worried that she's going to be sold to someone who is going to sexually assault her. And instead, she gets adopted by someone who is literally so fucking stupid, takes her to his wife, and his wife is like, she is ugly. So he drops her off at Riv's Sanctuary. He runs an animal sanctuary, and people think that she's literally an animal, even though she has the ability to think and process and speak. I don't know. This book put me into a fucking slump because this man repeatedly talks about how much he hates women, thinks women are like the bane of the entire existence, and literally compares her to a misbehaving animal. Ew. And also, it was tonally confused because we had some very, very heavy conversations about human trafficking, sexual assault, sexual abuse of a minor on page, and somehow it was trying to be funny. Like, there's a child that's literally executed in the middle of the street, and it just, no. Either be dark or be humorous. And I wasn't going for dark humor because dark humor has its own tone. It's like it would be something serious and then jump into the stupidest fucking thing. And I just hated this book to the depths of my soul. I DNF'd this at 70%. It put me into a reading slump, so I struggled. The other two books that I DNF'd, I'm not gonna tell you about one. One, I just got what I needed and then I kind of walked away from that. And then the other one is Lease on Love by Fallon. I don't like the writing of this. And the millennial humor was so over the top, I felt like they had taken a club and beat me over the head with it. Nope, not into it. So let's get into the books that I actually read. So in January, I've read 7 books. We're gonna go in order. I thankfully started the year with a 5-star. we have I Married a Naga by Regine Abel. This story is about a literal snake. So we are following a woman. She is a hunter, and the way this works in this world is that these hunters are there to take care of invasive species on planets, and this planet is struggling with a species that is like decimating all of the life on the planet. So they allow hunters to come and have a competition. My girl is on here, but there is this creature that is chasing after one of the main species on the planet. Is chasing after a child. She breaks the competition rules by going into their territory to save this child, and even though it was for a noble reason, instead of executing her because it was for a noble reason, she is forced to marry into their people. So she marries this dude here whose name I'm forgetting, and this story is about them learning more about each other, about their species, her settling into this planet, her learning that she can't be happy on this planet, and just how they fell in love. It was very cute. It was very fluffy. It was exactly what I needed. It was steamy.
You can get over the fact that he's a snake at some point.
Just don't think about it, just don't think about it. And I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was a great time. Then I read The Shuddering by Anya Alburn. You would have seen me talk about this book a lot in one of my recent reading vlogs because I had thoughts. In this book, we are following 4 or 5 people. 3 of them used to be friends, and 2 of them are like a friend and a partner. So they go up to this cabin in like the woods to have like one final skiing trip because one of them is leaving, and turns out there are monsters in the woods and they're gonna get hunted the fuck down because these monsters are hungry. My problem with this book was the pacing. Literally, we spend like 60% of the book just going through their own drama without them having any awareness that there are monsters in the woods. But once they run into the monsters, like, it goes all the way up. It gets very fun. It's very cinematic. You can definitely see it like a movie in terms of how the scenes are painted, the dialogue, the conversations they're having. It reminded me a lot of a video game. But what I'll say is there's this whole subplot in here about cheating that I really, really hated. And it made me feel like these men ain't shit. So that's why I gave this book 3.5 stars. I just think that we should have spent more time in the horror elements and less time in the ridiculous drama element. Oh boy. Then I read 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. 5 Survive was one of my most anticipated books. It came out in December of last year. I saved it to January of this year. I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is why I was so excited for this book. But this book had more plot holes than fucking Swiss cheese because it didn't make any goddamn sense. It was a fucking mess. The writing was chaotic, felt very outside of Holly Jackson's writing, but I've said this before, authors can write in whatever way they want. They are not trapped into one writing style. This was just completely chaotic. The characters were two-dimensional. The plot didn't make any sense. Like, if you thought about it for more than half a second, it did not make any fucking sense. Our characters acted like they were the cast of Scooby-Doo in the most ridiculous ways possible, and I cannot tell you how bad this book was. Just know it was 2.5 stars. However, if you just want a quick read, you're not going to think about it too hard, you might enjoy this. But honestly, this book completely lacks tension considering that it's a sniper situation. It's truly a gift to make a situation about 5 people being held hostage by a sniper have no tension at all. But that's just my opinion. And the slump continues. So I decided, you know what? I loved I Married a Naga. Maybe I Married a Minotaur can save me. And it did save me. This is also in the Prime Mating series, just like in I Married a Naga. So in I Married a Minotaur, we have a woman who is kind of in the criminal underbelly. She smuggles things from planets that she shouldn't be. And one day the cops are on her ass and her partner puts all the blame on her, and she is sentenced to 20 years in prison on this very harsh planet where she would essentially be crushed to death if she went. So when the prime mating agency comes and says, actually, it turns out you are a perfect match to this other person who is part of this species on a planet that has a lot of tension, we will shorten your sentence to only 1 year. And instead of being in prison for this 1 year, you're going to be married to this minotaur. And because this prime mating agency, they have a species of people who work for them who can tell if people will have a bond and are soulmates, they reassure her, this person is a minotaur, they are your soulmates, you are going to have a good time, just go for this 1 year, help us out, and you'll be good to go. She obviously agrees, because 1 year on a beautiful planet married to a man who was your soulmate versus 20 years in prison for something that you barely did, the choice is obvious. So she does agree to marry this man. The problem is, on this planet, minotaurs are very aggressive beings. Just naturally, their testosterone levels are meant to heal them and to help them become stronger. So they constantly have to fight as part of their healing properties. Our leader minotaur guy, this guy on the cover, is trying to tame that within his people and find a healthier outlet, because he's tired of them warring and them killing each other. And this story is about them trying to figure out the solution to save their planet, to bring peace and prosperity to the people. And it's just pure fluff. There is no tension between our two main characters. They are just there to be happy and in love and have sexy times and help prevent a war. I would say if you like political intrigue, you will like this book. My only critique of this book, even though I love fluff, is that we don't get enough time between our hero and our heroine together. They are together, but often their time together is spent like plotting and trying to create this piece, as opposed to them just being in love and together. I would have preferred for this book to be longer and for them to have more time together. Now that the reading slump has been broken, I move on to read Ivan. I'm not going to tell you too much about Ivan, because you're going to see it's coming up in a video, but Ivan is by Sophie Lark. It is a mafia romance. I think it's described as a dark romance, but honestly, I don't think it was that dark. In this book, we are following a girl. I'm forgetting her name. Goddamn, I forget the names of all my characters. Yeah, so this girl, she is an assassin, and she gets this deal to kill Ivan, who is the lead of this mafia gang in Russia, and she thinks it's crazy, but it's a lot of fucking money. So she takes the deal. She actually gets super, super close to him, like literally standing over his body. And he wakes up. So obviously my girl gets caught. That's not a spoiler. That is the plot. But he's like, damn bitch, that's sexy. You almost killed me. No one's ever gotten that close. So he takes her hostage to try to find out who killed her. He tortures her, by which they really mean they have some BDSM play as her torture. But it turns out he's completely obsessed with her. He's like, I'd rather fuck you. I don't have to keep you prisoner. You're fine. So it's them coming together and this rival mafia gang. And I ate this up, although I will tell you, for the first 30 pages, I was struggling because of the fat phobia in this book. Eventually that does go away. It very much focuses on them. I love a badass female character. I love that she is an assassin and he's in the mafia. Yes, it is very insta-love. It's very messy, and it's fun in the way that reading fan fiction at 2 a.m. is fun. And to me, I love fan fiction. So that is a compliment. I gave this book 4 stars. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was exactly what I was looking for. A fun, smutty, quick, ridiculous read. And The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins is the next book that I read. This book is a Jane Eyre retelling about this girl named Jane. She was living in this town in Birmingham, Alabama. I initially thought Birmingham, England, but no, it's Birmingham, Alabama. And she works in this very rich neighborhood walking dogs. And one day she's walking a dog and she runs into this man who's hella fucking rich, and he's into her. He buys a dog just so that she can walk his dog. And this story is about them coming together, falling in love, getting married, and the secrets in both of their past. I gave this book 3 stars because I think this is literally just a direct Jane Eyre retelling with a little bit more depth on the side of our male character, and I think this book spoils itself way too much. Jane Eyre, if you know exactly what's going on. But if you don't, you would still know exactly what's going on, because the book literally spoils itself. It just didn't add enough to the whole Jane Eyre storyline. By the way, my cup of water magically appeared in the background. I was drinking it. Yeah, it just didn't add enough to that, and I feel like Jane as a character could have had more like depth and dimension. I liked who she was at the beginning of the story, and I still like her at the end, but at the end she's just like letting opportunities come to her, and I feel like at the beginning of the story she was about making opportunities. I think that she could have been more. She could have had more development, and she could have definitely been the drama in this story, but she was not, and it was just fine. But a book that was more than fine, it was truly just perfection, is These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Alice Marshall. I don't know why I didn't recognize the name Kate Alice Marshall, because I was reading 13s last year, so I should have known that These Fleeting Shadows is in fact a YA book. But listen, it is a gothic masterpiece, literally the gothic fairy tale of my fucking dreams. If you don't like gothic horror, you might not be into this, but at no point in this book did I know what the fuck was happening, and once I did, I was like, brilliant. So in These Fleeting Shadows, we are following a young girl named Helen. She is living with her mom and her stepdad when her grandfather dies, and they go up for the funeral at this place called Harrow Hall, where her mom's family has grown up. When Helen was really young, like 7 or 8, they fled the house. They have no idea why. They don't have any memories of why they would have. They just know, don't go back to Harrow Hall, but they have to for the funeral. At the funeral, they find out that Helen has been named the like master of Harrow Hall, and in order to claim her inheritance of $40 million and this house, she has to stay there for an entire year. She agrees to it. I think Helen is like 17 or 18 years old at this point, and this is about her year living at Harrow Hall. People are like not allowed to go out at night. Something is digging holes in the yard. There's something weird going on. There's a witch in the forest. This book is sapphic, and it is just so good. I highly recommend that you listen to the audiobook. Like, this book has robbed me of my ability to speak about it because it is just a masterpiece. Like, that's all I can tell you. It's a fucking masterpiece. Go read it. Go read it. It was just so good. It's 5 stars. If this book does not end up on my top books of 2023, I will eat my own shoe. Like, it's just that good. Anyway, it was brilliant. I loved it. Now, coming to the final reflection of the whole TBR thing, which I feel like I've been very scattered and chaotic in talking about, I definitely did not read a lot of the books on my TBR. I don't even know what TBR was, but I didn't. I'll put the read versus unread on the screen so you can see exactly how I did. It didn't work for me because there were certain points where I was just like, I don't want to. Like, I was reading this book here, which is Slewfoot, and then I stopped reading it. Why are you expanding? Anyway, and then I stopped reading it because it was too much for me in terms of like the misogyny and the patriarchy and the Puritan society and just like how much they hated women. It was disgusting, in a good way, in sense of like the book was able to evoke that emotion within me. I'm gonna continue with Slewfoot, which is why it's not on DNF. I was also reading, let me just put this book back. I was also reading Babel, which is dense, besties. It's dense. It's taken me a long while to get into, and it's definitely not a book to read while I'm recovering from a reading slump, so I'm gonna save that till later. And by that point, I was just like, this whole TBR thing isn't working for me. It's not helping me have more consistency in my reading. It's just making it so that I don't want to read because I have to be in the mood to read a certain book or a certain storyline. If I read something and I'm not in the mood to read that thing, I'm not going to enjoy it. I know that about myself, but what I did like about having a set TBR is being able to mood read from that list, if that makes sense. So if there was a point that I knew that I wanted to read, but I didn't want to endlessly scroll Kindle Unlimited or my like to read list on Goodreads, then I knew that I had a smaller list I could pull from, which is how I ended up reading books like The Shuddering or Ivan, because I didn't have to think about what books I wanted to read. I could just pull from that list. So I think a happy medium for me is perhaps setting a TBR, but just having that be kind of like a, if I don't know what I want to read, I can choose to read from this list. But that does bring us to the end of this video where I talked your fucking ear off about December and January. I'm still thinking about Shrek porn because Jesus fucking Christ, that book. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you would like to, and I will see you next time. Bye!